Hi. So you're thinking of doing a global collaborative project and flattening your classroom. And maybe you're wondering whether you should. Maybe you're questioning whether all the extra work is going to be worth it. Perhaps you're worried about taking time away from the real work, to spend on this crazy global project stuff. And maybe you're wondering if it really actually makes any difference in the long run anyway. Well, let me share a little story with you. First of all, you guys know how this stuff works, right? So it's all about flattening the world. It's all about flattening our classrooms. Because the web has created this world where it actually doesn't matter whether you're in the classroom next door, or in a classroom in the next town, or a classroom on the other side of the world. In fact, you could be here, or you could be here, or you could be here, or you could be here. It really doesn't matter. I can still work with you. My kids can still work with your kids. It really does not matter. Our geography actually means nothing. And sure, the time zones can be inconvenient at times, and sometimes when you work across borders, you need to be mindful of cultural differences and language challenges and stuff. But that's what makes it interesting. So you've probably heard that working globally, collaborating together, discovering other cultures, and working together on problems that actually matter is a pretty cool way to learn. And I think as educators, we just assume that this stuff is good for our kids. It's almost intuitively, we kind of get the benefits that learning like this must be bringing to our students, right? It must. It's making them collaborative, innovative, global citizens, creative global citizens, equipping them with mindsets, attitudes, tools for life, and helping them understand that the world truly is flat. And at least that's what we hope. Doing all this global collaborative stuff is actually pretty new, isn't it? So we hope that it will provide our students with these skills and knowledge that they need to succeed and to make a difference in the world. But really, who knows? Wouldn't it be good to be able to fast forward into the future and actually see what effect this sort of learning has had on our kids? Wouldn't it be neat to be able to actually know just how much of a difference that working in a flat classroom has made to our students' lives in the longer term? If only we had a time machine into the future. Well, I don't have a time machine into the future, but I do have one into the past. Because you see, I did my first global collaborative projects with students in 1997. That's 15 years ago. I was teaching at a school here in Sydney, a boys' school, and we connected with two other schools. One in Athens in Greece and another in Nagano in Japan. Now at the time, Nagano was just about to host the 1998 Winter Olympics. Sydney was well underway with its preparation to host the 2000 Summer Olympics, and Athens, as well as being the place that started the entire Olympic movement, was also in line to host the next Summer Olympics in 2004. So we thought it would be a pretty interesting project to get together and learn together about the Olympics. And in particular, taking the perspective of a city that was preparing to host the games, as we all were. So we did this project. We researched together, we sent each other lots of photos of our cities, and we wrote stories about the excitement of being a host city. And we even sent packages of artefacts back and forward via snail mail. We even sent the Sydney Olympic mascots here, I've got them on the desk, to our partner schools, and we asked them to keep a travel diary with them. And they did the same for us with their mascots. So as my students watched the Nagano Games on TV that year, many of them said to me, they told me that working on the project totally changed their perspective about them, that the games seemed more real, they could relate to them. And we just found that working across the internet like this to connect with students in other places just seemed like such an obvious thing to do. Even back then, in the late 90s, several years before we could honestly claim it was, 21st century learning, the idea of using the internet to take our learning beyond the walls of the classroom seemed like a pretty natural thing to do. Now, over the next few years, myself and my students, we continued to do some global projects with schools in other places. In 1998, the next year, we worked with schools in Chicago and Japan, and we collaborated together to build an online interactive novel together. And the kids planned it, wrote it, edited, illustrated, they created the novel together, not as three classes, but as one class that just happened to be in 3 different places. And every day we passed files back and forth, we edited each other's works and provided feedback and encouragement, and they were debating ideas that they didn't necessarily agree on until they were resolved in a way that everyone was happy with. It was a truly amazing experience as a teacher. As a teacher, I learned the true meaning of collaboration that year, and I discovered what it meant to put the students at the centre of the learning. And I realised, in a way that my traditional classroom never really let me realise, that if you can connect students with a project they care about, give them the skills and the resources they need, and then just get out of their way, they will completely astonish you every single time. So in 1999, the next year, I worked with most of these same kids again, and we did another global project. And again, we worked with schools from the US and Japan, and together we built this amazing website where we explored the way our 3 countries celebrated special events. And they explored the difference and the similarities between our cultures, and they learned that really, no matter how different we might be, that we have a lot in common. They wrote, they edited, they shared stuff, they edited text, they created graphics, they made images together, they even created video footage together. And let me tell you, back in the late 90s, creating video for the web was nowhere near as easy as it is today. In fact, really, nothing was as easy as it is today. Back then, when the web was still 1.0, creating anything for online was a lot of work, and it was pretty technical. But my students just seemed to really love it. They really, really loved it. So, back to that time machine. I recently got to wondering, whatever happened to those kids I worked with back then? So I tried finding some of them on Facebook just to see what they were doing these days, and to ask them whether they felt that anything we did back then made any sort of lasting difference to them. So let me introduce some of them to you. So this is Richard. As we worked on our global projects back in the late 90s, Rich fell in love with graphic design and web design and creating digital stuff. And today, he lives on the North Coast with his family, and he owns a successful web design company. And I spoke to him recently, and he remarked to me how the stuff we did back in school all those years ago was a real turning point for him in discovering his passion. And today, his business, he has clients all over Australia and the US, and he commented to me how natural it feels to work like that because he had the chance to learn those skills when he was so young. This is Lawrence. Lawrence, as a teenager, Lawrence was very active in the projects we were doing all those years ago, and he sent me an email recently, and he told me how when he left school and he was applying for IT jobs, he had all these opportunities open up to him because of the experiences of working globally. And he told me that having this experience on his resume was actually what differentiated him from some of the other applicants, because his potential employers could actually see that he was able to work as part of a global team, and that he understood the idea of working across distance using the web. And he went on to tell me that he thought that the stuff that he did back then in school and collaborating with other schools was something that he would actually never forget. It made an impact. This is Daniel. Daniel was the team leader for most of the projects we did back then. And as a 13-year-old kid, Daniel was a quiet kid. I threw a lot of leadership onto Daniel, and he really rose to the challenge. These days, Dan works for Seek.com, one of Australia's largest online employment services, where he runs their IT department. He also travels a lot. He's done a bit of web consultancy on the side, and he started quite a few, numerous actually, entrepreneurial projects. This is Peter. As a teenager, Peter was a quiet kid, and when we worked on these global projects together, Peter took on lots of responsibility to manage stuff, manage processes, create media, and follow through on stuff, follow through on the planning. And Peter consistently amazed me with the way he was able to lead by example. And today, Peter is a senior multimedia manager at Yahoo 7, the Australian arm of Yahoo. And finally, this is Chris. Chris was one of the youngest kids in our team back then, and Chris was always a team player. He was always willing to take on whatever jobs we threw at him. And he was one of those kids who was always reliable, always there, and always willing to get involved. And today, I spoke to him recently, Chris, as well as being a key musician, he currently works for Apple. When I asked these guys about whether those experiences at school had any lasting impact on their lives, they were all pretty unanimous in their opinion. Yes. In fact, Chris and Peter both took the time to contribute a short video clip with their thoughts, so I'll just play it and let them speak for themselves.
Virtual classroom is one of the most fondest memories I have of high school. It's sort of, when I think back of my experiences in different learning environments in school, that's the one that stands out by far the most. And I think it's because it allowed me to sort of put into practice a lot of the experiences and passions that I already had relating to technology and the internet, which at that point in time it was still relatively a new thing. Video conferencing was something that people were still just getting involved in for the first time. And even today it's not something that really is used that heavily in classrooms, especially from what I've seen. But it allowed me to sort of encapsulate what it was about technology that I was interested in. I work at Yahoo 7 now, which is a mixture between a technology and media company. And I think it was those aspects of virtual classroom, the collaborating among different teams, the putting together all the content in the technology of the website, and then actually broadcasting it to an audience. And it was all those things combined that sort of, maybe I didn't realize it at the time, but it was the combination of a passion that I wanted to pursue for my career. And just in general, just the experiences of working with other teams, other people from around the world. It was very, very much a learning experience, but also a entertainment experience. It was entertaining. It was fun. It was something that I actually looked forward to doing.
Now I think back, I definitely would have picked up skills and just working in a team. And I think that with education, part of it, the beauty of it is when it's done well, it's something that you don't feel you've learned. It's something that's just ingrained in you. The skills are just ingrained in you. The traits are ingrained in you. You don't have to recall that information. And I guess that's why initially when asked the question, nothing came to mind of what was the long-term value of virtual classroom for me. But the more I thought about it, as I said earlier, I really realized that there is a lot that I've picked up from it. I think when it comes to education, being able to, develop teamwork, develop communication, and just develop technology, media skills is hugely powerful and hugely important these days, and something we take for granted. So I'm very lucky that I got a head start on those things, and 15 years to work up my skills.
So, as you think about the possible value of flattening your classroom and what benefits it might bring to your students, I want to encourage you to think long term. It's not about whether it will improve their test scores or how they will demonstrate their learning in order to get a grade. It's more authentic than that. It's more important than that. It's bigger than that. Taking on a global project which flattens the world for your students could very well end up being the thing that in the long run makes a real and lasting difference to their lives.